All right, third front line would be Nigeria. This is, of course, Africa's most populous nation. It is also the largest mixed Christian-Muslim population anywhere in the world. It's a population that is today close to 200 million, that is roughly evenly divided between Christians and Muslims. A friend of mine who is an Islamic imam in Abuja, which is the national capital, says that Nigeria is the Vatican and Saudi Arabia all rolled up into one. And there is a long tradition of peaceful Christian-Muslim coexistence in Nigeria, one has to say, so the news is not all bad. But what has happened of late is that there is a new Islamic radical movement in Nigeria which has links to global Al-Qaeda, which is called Boko Haram, which in the Hausa language in northern Nigeria means Western education is prohibited, which indicates the kind of anti-Western and more specifically anti-Christian psychology of this group. And as you can see from the slide, violence linked to Boko Haram in the last 6 months alone has cost a minimum estimated 2,000 lives, most of them Christian victims. And again, the symbolic expression of all of this would be the Christmas Day bombing of St. Teresa's Catholic Church just outside the national capital of Abuja, which, as you can see from the slide, left 32 people dead. Now, I was just talking the other day to Archbishop John Onaikan of Abuja, the Archbishop of the national capital of Nigeria, who is a guy I have known for many years. I consider him a close friend. And I was asking him how his life has changed because of the rise of Boko Haram. And here is what he told me. He told me that one way his life has changed is that outside his very modest residence on the outskirts of Abuja, he now has Catholic Boy Scouts out there supplementing the local police, checking cars and visitors as they come and go for bombs, because his life has personally been threatened by the Boko Haram at least 12 times in the last 3 months. These are the daily realities that Catholics, both at the top and the bottom of the church, are living through in an increasing number of parts of the world. Okay? Finally, let's look at India, just to make the point that this is not all about the Middle East, and it's not all about places where Islam has a significant sociological footprint, because the church and Christians of various stripes also face a serious and growing threat in India from a rising tide of Hindu radicalism. What is happening in many parts of India these days, particularly in states of India that are under the political control, the BJP, which is the political party that is linked to the Hindu radicals, is that attacks and assaults on Christian targets are becoming so routine that increasingly they simply fly below radar. I mean, just in the last week, ladies and gentlemen, and by that I mean since Monday, okay, just since Monday, a Pentecostal pastor and his wife were drug out of their church when they were having Monday evening Bible studies in northeast India, in Karatanka, the state of Karatanka. And the pastor was beaten to such an extent that he actually lost his right arm. And on Wednesday, another Pentecostal church was assaulted in the eastern state of Orissa. 20 people were injured within an inch of their life by a band of Hindu radicals wielding machetes and insisting that they had to leave India because they were a foreign presence within Indian culture. And once again, the emblematic expression of what I'm talking about would be the astonishingly violent anti-Christian pogrom that took place in the state of Orissa in 2008. This was incited when a Christian pastor was accused of forced conversion of a small group of local Hindus. And the Hindu radicals took advantage of that opportunity to whip up a frenzy of anti-Christian hostility. They attacked in a kind of targeted, strategic fashion every Christian church, school, and social service center in this district. That pogrom went on for 18 full days, ladies and gentlemen, with no intervention by the local police because that state is under the control of the BJP. The police simply stood back and watched it happen. In the end, 100 people were dead, hundreds, if not tens of hundreds, were injured, thousands were left homeless, and the infrastructure of the church in that part of the country was essentially destroyed. Okay? These, ladies and gentlemen, are the realities of our times, and I come back to where I departed. Whatever you may think about the challenges that Christians and people of faith face in American culture in the 21st century, I hope you would agree with me that the realities I have just described are far more urgent and far more dramatic than any form of oppression that we may experience or perceive. Okay? Now, let's step through 5 common myths about this global war on Christians I've been trying to describe. Let's begin with this one, that Christians are vulnerable only where they are a minority, which is what a lot of people often believe. The reality, as you can see from the slide, is that Christians, in truth, are actually vulnerable everywhere. Now, first of all, even if it were true that we're at risk only where we're a minority, bear in mind, folks, there are 2.3 billion Christians on the planet today. 10% of them live in societies where Christians are a minority, which would mean that even if this were true, it would still leave 230 million people at risk of their lives. It would still be a big deal, in other words. But the reality is that it's not true. Even in overwhelmingly Christian and overwhelmingly Catholic nations, Christians are exposed. As you can see from the slide, of the 26 Catholic pastoral workers, that means Catholic clergy or lay people who work in a full-time capacity for the church, of the 26 Catholic pastoral workers who were killed in 2011, only 1 died in a country where Christians are a minority. That was a Polish priest who was martyred in Tunisia. But the truth is, much of this violence occurs in overwhelmingly Catholic societies. As you can see, there were pastoral workers killed in Burundi, in South Sudan, the newest nation on earth, which is 98% Catholic, and in the Philippines, another overwhelmingly Catholic society. Colombia is the clearest example of the point. It is, for centuries, one of the Catholic strongholds of South America. And yet in Colombia since 1984, as you can see, there is a staggering total of 70 priests, 2 bishops, 8 religious, and 3 seminarians who have been assassinated and martyred since 1984 alone. And the picture on the slide is another example of it. It is a Mexican laywoman. As you can see, the name is Mary Elizabeth Macias Castro. And by the way, the Holy Father is going to be arriving in Mexico in about an hour to begin his 3-day trip to Mexico before he moves on to Cuba. The memory of this woman is going to be raised by the Pope while he's there. She was a Scalabrian lay missionary. She was actually the leader of the Scalabrian lay missions in Mexico. And she was also a blogger. She went under the pseudonym of the Lady of Laredo because she lived in Laredo. And what she did on her blog is she reported on the activities of the local drug cartels, trying to expose them to the full light of day. And for her trouble, for her advocacy and activism against drug violence, one of the cartels kidnapped her, held her for ransom, and even when the ransom was paid off, they then executed her in a particularly grisly fashion. They cut her head off and left her in the central public square in Laredo with a note that read, "This is what happens to you when you challenge the cartels." Okay? And Mexico, of course, is one of the most thoroughly and pervasively Catholic societies on earth. My point is, do not succumb to the illusion that just because someone lives in an overwhelmingly Christian or Catholic society, they therefore are insulated from harm. That is not the reality.